You landed on The Substance, a podcast aimed at being biblical, thoughtful, and human. I'm your host, Phil Marinello, joined by my tired co-hosts, Trevor Rankin.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
And Vincent Edwards.
What's going on?
It's been a week for us guys, huh?
Yep, yeah. And we appreciate everybody who's joined us this week to engage the culture without the culture war.
If you're new to The Substance, thanks for clicking. Thanks for joining. Hope you hit that subscribe, hit that 5 stars if it's worth it. But we're a variety show. We do long form shows. We do these topic toss-ups, interviews, book and movie reviews.
It's a podcast. You're here.
We're a podcast. We've got over 70 episodes. So if you like this, check out some of our back catalog. We got some great stuff with some great people. And tonight is one of our listener favorite formats is the topic toss-up. We're going to be hitting a couple different things tonight. So Vince, what do we got first?
So I wanted to kind of pose a question. It's this thing called partisanship. It seems just kind of weird, if you know what I mean. And I'll say this, to have an affiliation with the party and have a strong association with that party because you feel that that particular party represents your ideas or your visions or just what you think is necessary for a progressing country. I get the idea or the principle that's in that. But I think the way Americans involve themselves in partisanship can be, to put it nicely, a bit overzealous. What do you guys think?
For sure.
Yeah. I just was thinking about, people get high and mighty about the founding fathers and they're imperfect people, but to a man, every single one of them was really concerned that there would be a day if we had political parties where people would do things that were more expedient for power in the political party and pursuing that and kind of circling the wagons versus doing what was right for the people.
100%.
And looking around, it's like, yeah, they're kind of right about that.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest issues is a lot of this partisanship has deeply bled into the church. And it brings some concern.
Yeah.
And when you say that, what do you mean, Vince?
Well, there seems to be basically this association that if you are a Christian, you are a part of a political party. If you are a Christian or you're a part of the church, then almost by default or by association, you are going to be a part of a particular political party. And if you have any deviation from that, and we're not talking about any deviation from orthodoxy or even orthopraxy necessarily, depending on what you're talking about, but there's no deviation. You're just saying from a political standpoint with this political group, I don't agree or I don't associate myself with that or I don't think that they're accomplishing that in the best way, then it's like, well, now you might not be a Christian,
a heretic,
anymore.
right?
Yeah,
or at least you don't have the spiritual maturity to really think through these issues,
right.
etc.
I think I was thinking about this. I was having a conversation. It's actually going to go to my shout out here later at the end of the episode here. But I was talking with some folks about this recently. I think it's two main failures. I think it's a discipleship failure. And just speaking straight up, a lot of ways a leadership failure. These political categories that bleed into the church is often not, and again, I'm not a political scientist, so take this with a grain of salt, but from what I've seen, what I've read, what I've heard experts in their fields kind of describe, and it very much rings true with my observations, is that the church or many churches, denominations, traditions have allowed themselves kind of just to be used. We don't create these things. Pollsters and political teams and political strategists kind of create these terms, kind of present them to us, and frankly, the churches who desire to maybe have more power or to be a part of things in a maybe more pragmatic and expedient way, we're like, yeah, we'll fit ourselves into that box for you. It doesn't come down from clearly from Jesus himself, but not like, okay, I have studied the Bible, and contrary to what some pastors with very large pulpits have said that we've talked about before, there isn't like reading the Bible will be like, okay, I have studied the Old and New Testament. I've read it from cover to cover. I've prayed through it. I've studied it. I've done my textual criticism, and this is the party of the faithful believer. This is the party of people who will honor God. If I'm going to honor God, gonna be a Democrat, gonna be a Republican. Like, this is the answer. I've got it. Like, that doesn't exist. So we allow ourselves, churches allow themselves to kind of be put into those categories. And when you don't fight back, when we have a bipartisan system where there kind of are two functional options, it's easy to be like, okay, we want to play, so which team are we going to get on?
Exactly. And I think some of that, I mean, you took in a direction that was even different than what I was thinking, Phil, but I think it's a good direction talking about discipleship in the church. And like, regardless of what the political system is, the church should be able to function faithfully. So that's a bigger issue for sure in the church. People should have awareness of the reality in the culture and in politics and how it influences the church in order to shepherd their people well. The other thing I was thinking, though, is our system kind of is set up for this, right? Like the way our voting is, the way political organization happens in the United States. And there's, I mean, a ton of things up and down, local to national structure that cause this. And I can't get into all of that here. But one thing that pops out to me is, I mean, just when we vote, right? It's you vote for your one person, and then whoever gets the majority of the electoral college wins, right? Like, that's just it for presidency. And obviously not with the electoral college, but all the way down the ballot, like that's just how it is. Kind of this first past the post thing. And just functionally, that tends to squeeze out the middle, because if somebody is in the middle,
you just don't have a shot.
You don't, all the voters who are distributed all along the edges and everything, they're not going to vote for that middle person, because if they do, they'll split their vote with him and the other person, and then the person that they don't want the most is going to win. So instead, they'll pick the person who's further on the edge. It's going to drive more extremism and things like that. And so, you can model these things out even mathematically and look at the things that will happen. And honestly, you look at other countries, and they have there's countries that have different voting systems, that have different political structures in such a way in democracies where they have multiple parties that have to form coalitions in order to get a government working, right?
And many of the countries are less diverse and less populous than ours too, which is we have an unfortunate system.
Like Germany, for example, right? There was a party that just came to power there, and the very first thing they're going to have to do is form a coalition government. So they're going to have to get one of the other parties to work with them. They're going to have to make some compromises. They're going to have to talk it out. They're going to have to figure some stuff out together. And so I'm not saying that we have to do things like Germany does, blah, 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 but I'm saying we need to think about structural ways that, like, our system causes this partisanship in a way, because there can only be two options, A and B. And what it's going to take is somebody in power. This kind of goes to our power episode.
Yeah.
It's going to take somebody in power to be willing, for the good of the country, to divest themselves of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, to sacrifice their desires, their priorities. We shouldn't have so much of a problem preferring our neighbor. Like, even if we actually, I was talking with somebody about this recently as well. Even if we shouldn't be looking at people in other political parties as our enemies. Even if we do, Bible's got a lot to say about how we treat our enemies. Like,
that's right.
And it's not the way that extreme left wing or extreme right wing 24/7 rage media tells us to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is, I think rage media is a really interesting thing too, right? Because now with social media, with like, I hate the term mainstream media, because honestly, the non-mainstream media almost is worse about these things. But capitalizing on division and on posts and news articles and headlines that cause division and cause a stir and cause friction, that, capitalizing on that for clicks, for gains, for shares, driving ad revenue. Yeah, ultimately driving ad revenue.
It's money and power.
Exactly.
And when you break it down to that, and it's clearly all about money and power, people of faith should not look just like the world in relation to money and power.
Yeah.
And I have to say that because this has been kind of boiling in my spirit for a minute.
All right, lay it down.
So it reminds me, especially, so I'm talking to the believers and how we act, think, interact, because you guys have already mentioned it, like how we should treat our enemies is much different than how we do if we see the left or the right as our enemy. Mm-hmm. And one, that's already like, it's crazy that you're thinking that way anyway, because you both are Americans. But anyway, Galatians 5, 19 through 21 talks about the works of the flesh. And then right behind that in 22 and 23, it talks about the fruit of the Spirit. And oftentimes, especially in the Reformed tradition, juxtaposing to charismatic tradition, because charismatics say you have to have this kind of evidence, you have to speak in tongue, Mm-hmm. And I've heard Reformed people say, well, the evidence of a person having the Holy Spirit is a lot less likely the whole charismatic thing, but it's actually the fruit of the Spirit being lived out in a person's life.
Right.
But it's like, okay, but if we look at this thing that we are engaging in, partisanship, the political spectrum, it really looks like the works of the flesh, how we operate, how we think, because a part of that list it's a pretty long list, but one of those is strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy. And it's like, these are things that we are embracing because we feel that our party's under attack.
Yeah.
And so we are ultimately, whether if the Holy Spirit is within that person, they're definitely in a space where they are much more embracing the works of the flesh rather than the fruit of the Spirit. And so this should really, like, this is not just saying, hey, well, love your neighbor and don't, just be pacifist. It's like, no, we're saying that if we are saying we live for Christ, then he's laid out not only what our tangible actions should look like, but where our hearts should be when we do it.
Yeah.
And that's super important. And I wanted to bring that to light because I think that's something we kind of miss. We go straight to the fruit of the Spirit and kind of overlook at the necessary assessment of, are we actually doing the works of the flesh?
Wow. Yeah, that list is too familiar, too descriptive of our hearts and our actions, our words towards each other. Man, I think that's a really good call out.
It's sad too, and I mean, let's say whatever side you're on, listener, you're real convinced of your side. Do you really think that all people who are right with God, who are living a righteous as they can life, seeking to pursue like obedience to the Lord and holiness, all these things that like you can't disagree about things? I mean, like if you just think about that as a principle, hopefully we would all realize, well, that's foolish. And like the Bible itself has plenty of examples where Christians disagreed with each other about things. So like, why have we worked ourselves up or allowed outside agents to work ourselves up into, if someone disagrees with me, then like there's like a moral implication to that?
You know what I think it is? I think, and at least in the discourse that I've heard, a lot of times very small things are elevated. I hear it so much now. It's a gospel issue.
Oh my goodness.
And so they're saying it's a gospel issue. It's a gospel issue. Well, yeah, this is a secondary, tertiary thing, but if you think about it and you kind of go along the line, it's really a gospel issue. And so we are pitting ourselves against other believers in Christ because we've either been convinced by someone, a talking head, or we've convinced ourselves that this is actually like threatening of I guess in a sense, our salvation or what we believe about the gospel. And that's the rhetoric that I keep hearing. And so people are convinced it's a much bigger issue than it might actually be because it's a gospel issue.
Yeah. Well, and I think that brings it back to the church and discernment and wisdom and being able to understand these things, and how a lot of times that instead is manipulated by stuff on social media, right? It goes into this the article that you saw recently, Philip, on Relevant, right?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, and we don't always plan. This is kind of funny how our three topics all kind of segue together. So there was a Relevant article about a 2019 analysis of some of the top supposed Christian Facebook pages. Of the top 20 in 2019, 19 of them were run by foreign troll farms, essentially.
Yeah.
What's a foreign troll farm?
So like dudes,
misinformation.
Yeah, like dudes out of Kosovo who aren't trying to start a Christian Facebook page, but
they're not trying to encourage the saints. They're trying to stir the pot.
Literally, literally. So in case people don't know this, there are foreign actors who get on social media and start accounts for the express purpose of causing division in America. Because division in America weakens our country, weakens the interests of democracy and foreign power and that kind of stuff. And there's probably a host of things to talk about even in that.
Yeah, politically and religiously, to destabilize us benefits our foreign enemies.
Yep. 19 of the 20.
19 of the top 20. And of the analysis, so these pages a month get 75 million users traffic their pages.
Wow.
75 million users who self-identify as people of faith think they're seeing stuff created by ministries or by Christians with writing platforms and things like that. And a lot of them are memes. A lot of them are verses out of contexts with provocative imagery, like things that stoke violence and division and things like that. 75 million Facebook users a month, and a lot of these, no shade to the senior saints, a lot of these are older people with maybe a little bit less natural ability because they didn't grow up in the internet world. So maybe less natural ability to kind of spot the signs of maybe what younger folks might see as like, this is clearly a fake thing. Old people see it and just take it on face value. Like, no disrespect. Like, I've had people in my life that have sent me things, or I've seen share stuff, and I've DM'd them, hey, like, I love you. I'm sure you meant super well. Like, that's definitely fake. That's clearly a fake thing. And they're like, what? Like, but I read it. It's that whole, like, but I read it on the internet thing. And it's, again, zero disrespect. It's just that the internet is not the 60 and up's natural habitat.
Well, yeah, and I think it goes back to news and sources too. Like when we see stuff that confirms our bias, that goes along with things that we already think, we already believe strongly, we already think there's good evidence for.
You got no reason to question it.
Yeah, you just read, you maybe read the headline. But this was interesting. So, and this was something I wish that Tyler had kind of put more into the article. I'm sure they're trying to keep it short. Agreed. For whatever they're trying to do on their website.
Make it a 2-minute read.
I know. And I would have loved to see something like maybe 3 times as long. I'm used to reading, long form journalism kind of stuff.
It's no Bradley Mason piece.
It's no, or like The Atlantic, you know what I mean? Like it's nothing like that. But I would have loved to see a little bit more about what the types of high velocity, high traffic posts were. And what was because he talked about division.
Like, let's go on a time warp. Y'all remember 2019? I remember some of the crap I saw older folks sharing. A lot of it was like Christianly, like sanitizedly violent stuff, like holy war, culture war. These are our enemies. Like we need to fight for the righteousness. Like the enemies of God, the enemies of holiness, the enemies of decency. All these things. Like
wow,
a lot of it was like violently like violent culture war stuff kind of masked with scriptural language is a lot of what I saw.
So kind of like Christian call to arms kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Wow.
looking at it through the foreign actor lens, it's like, yeah, if our national stage, I don't know if enemies is quite the right word, like people who would benefit from us being destabilized, we're a nation who faith is important to us. There's been a lot of faith is a large part of the American experience one way or the other. And if you have Christianity, which is the religion that the most people identify with, if you have the largest group of the largest religion at each other's throats, like that benefits you.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, Guidepost, I think, was the only one that of the top 20 that wasn't.
Yeah, 1 out of 20 was a legit.
Was
this is a
legitimate.
ministry.
Wow.
So here's an actual ministry versus all of this kind of stuff. So basically, you're looking through it right now, Phil, and you're seeing like basically it's they're kind of stoking,
Or like Jesus and John Wayne stuff, where you have Jesus with flag imagery, or you have a lot of like army or police, like law enforcement stuff, kind of mixed with like faith in militarism, faith in violence, faith in force together.
So in other
because
words,
of the enemies.
they're very pro-Christian nationalism.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's what it sounds like.
This is an interesting revelation. So like, if you think about this, right? Like, folks, and living in Texas, you see it all over the place.
Oh yeah,
You know,
dude, you're right there.
The Jesus memorabilia plus usually an M16 of some sort. No lie.
Bro,
No cap.
It's
Or like Bible and guns and God and guns and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting to think, oh, I'm being so American, but then when we analyze the actions of foreign agents who want to sow division and hurt America, that's their favorite memorabilia to spread.
Yeah.
So
Man, that's so. I mean, I am not personally one to participate in that. But goodness, it's very revealing, I would say, that kind of research coming out, because it's ultimately saying you are using that to say I'm doing something good for my God and for my country. And others have identified that as the best way to cause division.
yeah.
And that's insane.
I think beyond trying to get people to take violent actions, I think the biggest thing that has clearly happened, based on many previous episodes of The Substance with ourselves and with guests, is to cause us to see one another as our enemies.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is what has happened.
In other words, not to actually see each other as neighbors and then love them like God calls us to do, like Jesus calls us to do very explicitly and with a lot of his stories in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and I think what's so funny about a lot of this too is that we feel like we have to defend something. Like there's something that we need to protect, that God needs us to protect. And there are things, don't get me wrong, there are things worth fighting for in the world.
Sure.
But at the same time, God's got this, y'all. The way to fight, like, and the thing is, if we're going to say, oh, we want to fight the fight of faith, right? Like Paul says to Timothy, then we got to do it the way that they taught us to do it, which is the way of the cross, the way of self-sacrifice.
Right.
Which we kind of skip by it a little bit on the previous topic before we go too far. I'd love to take it back for a minute and get your guys' thoughts on, like, on the Facebook thing and with the partisanship. Like, this really truly shows the complete anemic nature of discipleship and community and true spiritual leadership in many churches. Certainly not all churches, and I'm not throwing everybody under the bus, but like Facebook, you look at your screen time, and I mean, Facebook is not our generation's social media app of choice, but I mean, take your favorite social media app of choice. How many hours a week do you average over a couple months? And then juxtapose that with how many hours a week in Bible reading? How many hours a week fellowshipping with the saints? How many hours a week leading your family or engaging with your family in prayer and worship and witnessing to your neighbors? Like, where's that time spent? Where are we being formed? Spiritual formation.
No, that's
good.
That's convicting, man. Yeah, because it's easy to like just kick back and you think you're engaging in, just chill or just harmless scrolling or whatever, rather than
You're being
protecting
discipled.
your time and ducking into a book or being purposeful or getting on the phone, calling a friend or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, because all that other stuff is hard. It's hard to like really devote yourself and focus in that when you feel like at the end of the day you want to do something different, but also understanding what the downward effect of that is, right? It can seem like it doesn't really matter a whole bunch, but when we're all sitting there on our couch scrolling and kind of just riding that wave versus really engaged with the Christian life, really, the compound effect of that on the whole church, because discipleship, you're also being you're being discipled when you're scrolling like that, but you're also not forming a deep life at the same time, and then you're also being prevented from discipling. So it's kind of poison in every way.
You're being prevented from, you're being handicapped from edifying one another, and you're oftentimes not learning anything real. And if you're in a certain demographic, with a certain level of gullibility, you're not being ministered to at all. You're just being programmed by an actual hostile foreign enemy.
Yeah, which is just the extra layer on that is crazy. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about like my morning routine and how much Instagram has been playing in that space, and I'm like, that needs to change. I need to.
Dude, since my second kid just turned 6 months super recently.
Yeah,
congrats.
Thanks. Last 6 months have been dog doo-doo for my morning routine. Just trash.
I'm sure it's
like
that 2 kids was rugged with the sleep.
I was in a nice groove for a while, and it's been trash for the last 6 months.
I feel that.
And I definitely want to, before we move forward, I definitely want to say, and I'm with you, like the social medias and most recently it's just like get up and go straight to work for me. It's just like start working. And not dedicating that time, and our evening routine is doing better, I will say that. But there is grace. It's one, and it's that balance, of you don't want to let yourself off by just saying, oh well, the Lord has given me grace, so I'll get to it when I get to it. You'll just sit there and wait, Lord. You don't want to have that kind of attitude or disposition. But then you also know that God is gracious, and He's loving, and He's kind, and He's ready and waiting for us to come back to Him and be discipled by those He's put in our lives, and be ministered to by those He's put in our lives, as well as His Word. And so it's an encouragement to those who are listening, who's also feeling that conviction, like, I am being discipled, or like you said, Phil, programmed by things that are unfavorable, that I don't want to be. And it's like, that's a blessing, that's a grace, that's a mercy. And then we ought to go back to what we know that will allow us to live a deep life.
Yeah.
So Trev, when we find ourselves being acted upon by maybe people with malicious intent, and it's clear that there are people trying to push believers and churches and entities into ways they shouldn't, and it's clear like there's malicious natural and spiritual forces out there, what might we do in response?
Well, yeah, I think that's a great question, right? Because there's so much in this world, whether it's the politics, the partisanship, the social media, the whatever, like just constantly bombarded. All of us are constantly bombarded with stuff that just is so frustrating and make us angry. And I think sometimes we forget.
Angry and tired, I feel like, are the emotions of the last few years.
Yeah. And I feel like we forget the Lord is angry as well. God has wrath. And if I've heard this recently, and I think it's really good, but like you can't believe in a God of justice who, like, without also believing in a God of anger.
Mm.
If God is just and the world is unjust, then if he's really just and really engaged, it makes sense that he's angry. And the Bible testifies to that, right?
Yeah.
That's not just saying logically he has to be angry. Like, no, like biblically, his response is anger to that.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting though is I think we're disconnected with that. I think we're disconnected with the idea that God is angry at the injustices of this world. But then I think the other thing, and I think that this shows in the way that we fail to engage with the Psalms and things, that we can be angry as well in that.
For sure.
And I think sometimes the best thing to do with that anger is to do what the psalmists do with it, and that is bring it to the Lord in imprecatory prayer. I'm looking at Psalm 69, and it says in verses 20 to 22, reproaches have broken my heart so that I am in despair. I looked for pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. They gave me poison for food, and for my thirst, they gave me sour wine to drink. Let their own table before them become a snare, and when they are at peace, let it become a trap. Verse 24 says, pour out your indignation upon them, and let your burning anger overtake them.
That sounds harsh, doesn't it?
It's interesting. Like we feel very uncomfortable praying in ways like that. Yeah. But I think I don't want to water down what the psalmist prays here, because I think he's praying it at a level too, and I think I have to learn more even to be comfortable to say things like that, right? Because like the Lord inspired these words, these prayers. That's why they're in the scripture. So it's not like somebody praying out of the flesh. But I think that we have a hard time with that, and I think we forget as well, like whether it's like political leaders or things like that. Like, I know one of the things that I've prayed before is, Lord, may they soon get the justice that they deserve.
Yeah.
May their misdeeds come to light. May their plans, their plots, and their backhanded whatever deals that we don't know about, may they come to light, and may they experience the negative consequences of that. May they experience the pain of that. May they experience the loss of power, the loss of clout, the loss of freedom potentially that is due those injustices. And I think we forget too as Christians, for people to experience in this life the consequence of sin is a grace and a mercy.
Word.
Right? When we see those things, one, we are reminded that we need to repent. And two, when people experience that, like, they realize that they can't just get away with it, right? Like the psalmist says, like, hey, the wicked thinks that because they're not immediately punished for the things that they do, that they can just get away with it. And of course we know that they can't, and that's the thing. So like there will be a judgment for that. And it is good for them to experience it here while they have a chance to repent, you know? And I think it's good and right for us in frustration over the injustices we see, whether that's in our government, our political leadership, even now, whether that's in the partisanship stuff that we've talked about before, whether that's in other systems, like to pray against that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I have dabbled in over time. And it's interesting thinking about just our, Trevor, your and I's like reformed theology backgrounds. Like we grew up very comfortable with the wrath of God, but I was still never really discipled into. We were told, hey, pray the Psalms, like pray scripture, but not really kind of discipled. Like, here is how one prays for, like, prays along with God that like justice be done. Like, in order for justice to be done, the ones it commits injustice to their fellow man, like that gets dealt with swiftly and harshly sometimes. So I mean, that's something that I don't feel terribly comfortable in. But I mean, you've even encouraged me, Trev, like just kind of talking about like how you've been thinking through things. Like, I think it is something that obviously we don't want to appoint ourselves judge, jury, and executioner and all that. but we don't want to take the judgment of God. Like when it says judge not, like that's actually like saying, don't put yourself in the place of God to be the ultimate judge. Like that's not who it is, but that's that God's will would be done and that wickedness would be stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe this is just my devil advocate's brain churning. My mind immediately goes to an overzealous individual who hears that, and because definition of imprecatory is like invoking a curse on someone.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I immediately hear a person, well, it's like, okay, well, the Lord has inspired me to be the judgment
Curse you.
on someone. And so I'm praying for that justice, and the Lord is leading me, or I feel the Lord leading me to be that justice.
No.
And I know it's wrong, but it immediately my mind goes to like people,
Sure.
and maybe not so much people that are listening to us, but just hearing,
Not you fine listeners. None of you are gonna
none
become
of
the
you guys.
Punisher. We hope.
No.
Become the Punisher.
Yeah.
Please
But yeah,
don't.
so and how so let's have a counseling moment for a second. A person comes up and does believe and feel that.
That's wrong.
That's wrong, but how do you biblically counsel them on that?
What does the Bible say to how to treat your enemies?
Just to love them.
How does the Bible say how to treat them? Yeah.
And but also to pray for God's justice to be done, not our justice.
Right.
The psalmist isn't saying, God, like, vindicate me. It's like, God, vindicate you. Like, you've said you'll be a defender of the weak and an upholder of the righteous. Like, God, vindicate your character, not vindicate my whims.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And once again, I think it comes back to power. That person has the wrong idea of power, of taking it into their own hands, taking up the sword. The very thing that Jesus said, no, this is not the way, Peter. This is not the way of power, but instead we heal the wounds of our enemies. Paul says that we do good to those who do evil to us. And it talks about heaping burning coals on their head, right? Like convicting them of their evil actions through our sacrifice. But that's what I'm trying to say. Like, if you're praying in an imprecatory prayer, like I prayed a lot of imprecatory prayers in 2020. And I can say I genuinely did it out of love, because the reality is, like I said earlier, if these evil men in power, right? Let's just be honest.
And women.
Evil men and women in power, but thinking about a few in particular.
Sure.
Experiencing the justice due their evil in this world would be a gracious wake-up call for them. Yeah. I want that for them, for their soul, because I want them to see the face of Christ, and bow the knee to him, while they have a chance.
Well, they have time. Like when
because
you're that,
every knee will bow. That I don't have to worry about, right? So that's why I don't have to take it in my hands, because every knee will bow. So I don't need to mete out judgment, because Christ got that. You know what I mean? Christ has the sword, right? He is good. He has got that base covered. He does not need my help. Yeah. So I think anyone who wants to take that in their hands, they don't understand their own evil heart, and they don't understand the power of Christ. And they're actually defaming Christ by assuming to try to take on his role in that way, as if they have any right to do that.
Oh, man.
Vigilantism doesn't really have a good idea of the character of God.
So here's what I'm saying. An imprecatory prayer can actually be stirred out of a heart of love for someone, someone who is evil, right? How do you love an evil person who is getting away with their evil? You ask God, please do not let them get away with this any longer. Please bring to light and bring to reality now the things that are due their actions. Because they won't get away with it forever. I am confident of that in you, Lord.
Yeah.
But for their own sake, and for the sake of the hurting, and for the sake of the afflicted, right? Like the psalmist goes on in Psalm 69 to say, when the humble see it, they will be glad, right? The humble in Hebrew, the humble and afflicted, very similar word group. So when the humble see it, they will be glad. You who seek God, let your hearts revive, for the Lord hears the needy and does not despise his own people who are prisoners. Right? So we're talking about afflicted, oppressed people. When they see the justice of God, they will be glad, right? So we're praying for it for them as well, right? Like that, it's for God's glory, but it's not ours to bring about because we trust the timing of God.
Yeah, that deeply reminds me of a recent show that came out on Netflix called Midnight Mass. It's entertaining for entertainment's sake, but it is about the worst biblical use that I've ever seen on television. And
Wow.
I mean, and it's almost exactly what we're describing. It's like they're just grabbing the verse and then saying, because I know that verse and it seems to fit this moment, I am going to execute XYZ action because of that verse that I knew. And I'm like, bro,
Wow.
these hermeneutics, it's not even happening. It's so bad on a scriptural level. But you can see how, like you said, if that balance is not there and understanding the fullness of scripture when it comes to justice and our action in that, then yeah, I mean, that's a great example. That television show is a great example of how left it can go.
Yeah. And I'd say this too, to you guys and to the listeners, like if you're not praying imprecatory prayers, why not?
Word.
Are there not injustices in this world that the Lord cares about and that the Lord wants the hearts of his people to care about? Are there not things that he wants brought before his throne room in reflection of his heart of justice and anger towards those things? If we have a heart for the needy, if we have a heart for the lowly like Jesus did, I mean, Jesus had woes that he talked about. You know, Jesus prayed imprecatory stuff in the Gospels. You can go and see what he said. If this is the testimony of Scripture of the hearts of those who represent kind of that heart of God's kingdom come on this earth, then why wouldn't we?
For sure.
Yeah.
That's a really helpful thing. That's a really helpful perspective.
And if we don't, what does it say? What does it say about our heart and what we think about this world, right? Have we become so home with this world that we're comfortable, right?
Getting that conviction in there. And then in that way, you're kind of no different than the people who are getting all political and partisanship.
And I don't think people
Partisan.
I think there are plenty of people who stave off of those kind of prayers because they think that is not a common rhetoric within the church, talking about pray for evil individuals who are in power, or no matter how small or great that power is, those who are doing evil to see the evil and reap the consequences of that evil. That is not something that I've commonly heard should be a practice in prayer. But I also think that those who do practice that, different from how you just describe it, don't do it out of love. And so there could be plenty of people saying, oh yeah, I'm praying for a particular, president or official or whatever to get the justice of God. But it's not coming from a place where it's like, because I want them to repent, is more, I want them to suffer and stop being against my party.
I mean, before we move on here, that just made me think of parenting in a way. Like, I mean, yeah, and I've been on both sides of it. And I remember when I was a kid, I was a bit of a mischievous little lad. I remember my mom telling me, like, she would pray that I'd get caught, like, whenever I stepped out of line. And boy,
it's imprecatory prayer right there.
I got in trouble so much. I did not appreciate that. But also, legit, straight up, I visited a number of my friends in jail. I could have gone down that road. But I mean, I had a very godly woman praying for me. I had good people in my life. Like, I mean, not that those low-level imprecatory prayers were the only things that, like, kept me on the straight and narrow, but, like, to see them, I think, in the way that Trevor and that we're trying to frame it on the show here, is that imprecatory prayers as in an act of love.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think that's the key right there.
I mean, the Bible talks about that, like a father disciplines the son he loves.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want to press that too hard into the Psalms too, because I know that there are places where you're just like, oh, these people
Oh,
rejected
roast these
you.
dudes.
Yeah, but I think it is a place where it's a good place to start as far as being in
Guarding our hearts from like hatred.
yeah, because of the church and because of the way that Christ's grace is and the open offer of the gospel and things like that, and never giving up hope on folks. I think that it's a place we can feel safe in that. I'm just looking at Psalm 5, and it's super good.
Mm.
And if you look at it there, let me just break it down really quick. Psalm 5. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you should if you're listening to this. I highly recommend it. The first 3 verses, he's saying, "Listen to me, God. I'm pouring out my sacrifices before you." Then he talks about God's character. You don't delight in wickedness. Evil can't stand before you. The boastful won't stand before you. You hate evildoers. You destroy those who speak lies. Then he talks about his steadfast love, why that doesn't, why that's not true of him, even though he's an evildoer. Like he's, because of the abundance of his steadfast love, he can bow down towards the holy temple in fear of God.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, these evil men, there's no truth in their mouth. Their throat is an open grave. They flatter with their tongue. And then this verse, make them bear their guilt, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Because of the abundance of their transgressions, cast them out, for they have rebelled against you. But let all who take refuge in you rejoice. Let them ever sing for joy and spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may exult in you. For you bless the righteous, O Lord. You cover him with favor as a shield.
Mm-hmm.
Is that all of Psalm 5, or is that portion? You want to give me the verses?
The portion that I read there
for the show notes here
was 9 to 12, but folks should read all of it for sure. So I don't know. And I know that Kyle wrote a whole book at this that I hope to read still, where prayer becomes real. But like,
I started to listen to that.
When we start to really pray all of what our experience is to God, and really open up to God in a full range and not just in our kind of liturgical modes that we were taught, then it will really enliven and round out people's prayer life to the Lord.
Yeah,
very much so.
I agree with that. And it's conviction for me. I definitely need to start doing that more.
Before we get to all the plugs at the end, listeners, let us know what you think about that. Send us an email, shoot us a DM on that. I would love to hear what you guys think about that.
100%.
Shoutouts.
Get to it.
Vincenzo, you want to bless our playlist?
I do want to bless the playlist.
Bless it.
So listener discretion is advised. I am shouting out an artist simply called Sir. Capital S, lowercase I, capital R. He's an artist.
Of course.
I'm not sure where he's from. I've been listening to him for a while. He doesn't have any new projects going on right now, unfortunately. But he does a lot of R&B, and he does singing. He does some rap. He's done a lot of really, really good tracks with a lot of popular hip hop artists. One song in particular that I've been recently listening to. It's one of his older tracks. It's with D Smoke.
All right.
And it's called You Ain't Ready. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's not a whole bunch of profane, language in that. You might get a splish splash, but it's not full of that. So like I said, just use caution, use discernment. But what I really enjoy about it actually is the bass line and just the almost like an artwork in the instrumentation, to the point where it's like it is just auditorily stimulating. It's just a really good song. But if you have time,
is this a TDE dude?
I think so, actually.
Oh, snap.
He might be. So nevertheless, definitely check out Sir. He's got he's been around for a while, so he's got plenty to listen to that dates back several years. So if you have time, check out Sir.
All right, so I didn't want to interrupt your shout out because I always interrupt your shout out. So I said this to the end, but I just couldn't get over Splish Splash cursing. And I just like was thinking about what if instead of on the album covers, they had, instead of the explicit, parental advisory thing, it was like you were entering the splash zone. Splash zone of
Splash.
I don't even know why. I don't ever use that in my vocabulary. That just came up out of nowhere.
Yo, we are tired.
When you cross this line, you enter the splash zone of cursing.
Splish Splash.
Splish Splash.
That's what Splish Splash is. What Show Brock is going to put in his next project.
Oh my gosh. No, that's good.
I don't have a really deep shout out this week, so but I did watch the premiere of Foundation on Apple TV Plus.
I am pumped for that. How was it?
I thought it was pretty good. Like the production value is definitely super high.
They spent $1 or $2 on that show.
I think they did, and it definitely shows. So I don't know. It feels epic.
Apple Plus.
There's only 2 episodes out, so kind of in the plot thickens phase. And
sure.
So it could end up being dumb, but I don't know. It seemed like a pretty fun start, and it's like very mathy, which is up my alley.
Isaac Asimov is like a super nerd. He's on my list to start getting into reading some of his novels. Like I talked about before, getting on Dune. Asimov is on my list, and this show looks real good.
Yeah, they're long. That's just like an hour long each. So
where can one see this?
On Apple TV Plus.
Apple TV Plus.
And is this a docu-series? Or...
No, it's a sci-fi.
It's a novel adaptation of a series
adaptation
of
a novel, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
He wrote like
we just got Apple TV, so.
Foundation.
All right.
I'll be checking some stuff out. Finally, probably get to Ted Lasso.
Oh, dude.
Oh, shoot. He's got 7 books. I thought he had like 4 or 5. There's 7 Foundation books.
Wow, that's cool.
What you got, Phil?
So my shout out this week is one that I believe I'm certain we've mentioned on the show. I don't know if they've had a formal shout out, but I'll be a little bit more specific. This is a Kansas City based podcast, even though I'm the only one here holding it down. I went to the kickoff meeting for the AND campaign Kansas City.
All right.
Earlier this week, and it was fantastic. COVID really kind of jacked up the launching of several AND campaign chapters around the country, but it was really exciting. Justin Giboney came and spoke, got to meet him.
Nice.
But really excited. We said we'll probably start to tackle 1 to 2 issues at a time. We're meeting in a couple weeks to start planning and strategizing like what local issues in Kansas City we want to start taking on as far as the mobilization and activism and things like that. But it's exciting to get with other people of faith who, we talked last month or several episodes ago about deconstruction. When you see people who, when the churches you were raised in kind of drop the ball pretty hard when it comes to a lot of the stuff we've talked about on this episode, partisanship, it's so heartening to not just on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or on podcasts, but to like get in a room with 50 or so other believers who love the Lord, but also care about loving neighbors, loving people in community. It was a really exciting and encouraging thing. So looking forward to AND campaign Kansas City here getting rolling.
Love that.
Nice.
Yeah, and shout out to all the churches who are involved in that, in whatever way that looks out. There's 13 different cities that are on it, so you guys can check the website. I know we got listeners all over the place. There's several chapters out there, and Justin said they want to get more going. So if you're in a city that doesn't have one and you're interested in principles over partisanship, check it out. Yeah. And for all the churches that are informally engaged in that work who aren't maybe necessarily a part of the AND campaign, but just doing the right stuff with their community and loving their neighbors, like shout out to all them.
And that's one thing we can be reassured that God always has someone.
That's right.
In the midst of all of this, that is going to not bend the knee to anything else but Christ.
That's fact.
And so thankful for that.
100%. Phil.
All right. Well, guys, this podcast is brought to you primarily by yourselves, you lovely listeners, you.
Love it.
we say this a lot, but
You're
big
lovely
thank
on the
yous to
inside.
sure. And on the dollar side,
Whoa.
thank you guys to everybody who is a monthly supporter of the Substance. I know we're not like some of the flashier, huge budget ones that are like, you'll get 10 extra episodes a month if you sign up. You're just joining us, helping us get things going.
You get all the episodes no matter what.
we're gonna be giving you our episodes for free. There may be some stuff down the road, but our hours are precious. And could you really imagine? We would definitely have to get some editing help. Could you imagine recording and editing bonus shows just for supporters?
Oh my
That
goodness.
would be bananas.
That would be insane.
But, yeah.
But so 21 and 21 is still going. That's in the link in the anchor. What we are hoping to get by the end of the year 2021 is 21 monthly supporters at $5 a month or higher. Sign up there at the anchor link for $5 or $10 a month. Or if monthly support is not really your preference, just want to throw us a couple bucks here and there when you're able, kind of feel that spirit, you can hit us up at Cash App at $the Substance Pod. And genuinely, we say this a lot, but it really means the world to us every time somebody signs up to give, or when we get the emails like, hey, somebody gave $5, somebody gave $10, somebody gave $20. Like, it's just,
we celebrate
it's a real warm feeling.
Yeah.
Super great.
And yeah, so we talked about deconstruction a little bit. We talked about partisanship. We talked about online troll farms. We talked about a lot of things today. Imprecatory
prayers.
Especially that was a really good segment. So we talked about a lot, and we want to know what you think. One of the best ways that we can find out how you think is not only visiting us on our socials at The Substance Pod. You can visit our website at thesubstancepod.com. There you will be able to follow all of our links, whichever is your social media platform of preference, and leave us a comment under a comment section or create a post and tag us in it. Or at the bottom of our homepage, you can submit a form, and that will send a direct email to us, and you can definitely tell us what you thought about this episode.
Type it in, just said Vince sent me. Just type that in.
Yeah, that's the code to get on the website, actually. There's a password. So yeah, visit us at thesubstancepod.com and follow us on the socials.
Boom.
We look forward to seeing you at thesubstancepod.com. If you are there, you'll see a contact form, but if you just want to pop open your email client, you can send us an email at thesubstancepod@gmail.com, or the most unique way to get in touch with us and just leave us a testimonial is on our phone line. You can give that a call at 913-703-3883. Leave a brief message there, and you may get on the show. So thank you once again for joining us. Me, Trevor Aiken, Vince, and Philip for this substantive conversation, and we will catch you next week
on The Substance.
Peace.
If you're new to The Substance, thanks for clicking. Thanks for joining. Hope you hit that subscribe, hit that 5 stars if it's worth it. But we're a variety show. We do long form shows. We do these topic toss-ups, interviews, book and movie reviews. What's so funny, guys?
I'm sorry, you said, is it worth it? And I couldn't help but think, let me work it.
Yeah, flip it and reverse it. Cool. Real cool. That's the blooper reel. That's the blooper reel.
I just couldn't help it.
We are some tired fools
Missy on the podcast.
We are some very tired fools. I know we don't have enough money to license that.
No.
No. And we'll lose that clean tag for sure.
That's good. Right. That's funny.
He's like a nerdy dude. He'd be a great person to invite.
Hey, you nerd.
Want to be on our podcast?